Okay, Boker Tov. We learn Leilun Yishmat Avik Chai Avram ben Rachel Leah Meir Tzvi. Um, and okay, then we'll leave it like that. I'm going to put the Mishnah on the screen. I'm going to go back and take a look at it. Just the first part, just the part that's in red or marked off in the red. We read it. And that's what we were talking about last week. We got a little bit into it and talk a little bit more about it today. Probably finish this Mishnah because I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the second half and then get into the next one, which will be the last one of Perek Shlishi. So we're right near the end of the chapter. Again, I can't tell you what number it is in your book. It could be 18, it could be 19, 20, 21. But we're in chapter 3 near the end. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Imein Torah in Derech Eretz. If a person doesn't have Torah, then they can't have Derech Eretz. Imein Derech Eretz ain't Torah. If they don't have Derech Eretz, they can't have Torah. We talked a little bit about that last week. We're going to talk about it more today. Imein Chochma, if there is no wisdom, ein yir'ah. There can't be proper yirat Hashem, fear or awe of God. Imein yir'ah, if there is no fear of Hashem, ein chochma, there is no wisdom. Im ein bina, if there's no intellect, ein da'at, there is no knowledge. Im ein da'at, if there's no knowledge, ein bina, there is no intellect. So, yeah, we see three examples of three words that seem to be similar: chochma, bina, and da'at, which are the words, the Rashi Tevot of Chabad, and we'll talk about that, and we'll see what these mean. And the last statement, im ein Torah, im ein Torah, sorry, im ein kemach ein Torah, there's no flour, meaning there's no food. There can't be Torah. Im ein Torah ein kemach. If there's no learning, if there's no Torah, there's no flour or food. Okay, we're going to talk about these. Last week we spent some time on the topic of the first line, which is im ein Torah ein derech eretz. So we'll talk a little bit more, just for a minute or two, about that. And then we're going to take a look at the flip side of what does it mean, im ein derech eretz. Sorry, ein derech eretz. Im ein derech eretz ein Torah. That's the second half. So there are many mitzvot in the Torah that are aimed at rectifying our midot, our character traits. The goal is to ensure to us to strive to be the best person we can. Our goal is not, even though the Rambam says, and he means it in the literal sense, that anybody has the ability to be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, not necessarily a Navi, but in their breadth and depth of knowledge of Torah. Anybody who has the mental ability, in other words, there's not something physically wrong with the individual, has the ability to become the equivalent in knowledge of Moshe Rabbeinu in Torah. Having said that, 99.99999% of people are not, but that's fine. Your goal doesn't have to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Your goal has to be a better you. And the Torah gives us multiple abilities through various mitzvot to improve ourselves. And that is the idea that with the more Torah, we improve on our derech eretz as well. What does that mean? Without what's the derech eretz? We discussed last week. It doesn't mean just how you act. Of course, it means that also. But it means the way of the earth is the literal translation. We're going to see in a few minutes what that really means a little bit more in depth. In addition to the Torah itself giving us many mitzvot to work on our midot, I'll give you one example. The Torah, Vasita Yashara Vehatov. You have to do that which is straight and good. And the example I've given many times, I've probably given in this class at least two or three, is you go down in the valley, in the valley behind some of our buildings, and underneath a tree you find a soccer ball and it has somebody's name on it. Normally, if you find something with someone's name, it's called a siman, or some sign that you can use to return it to somebody. But if you find it under a bush, it's obviously been there since the Truman administration, and it's old and gray, but it's got the guy's name on it. You have absolutely no requirement to return it. There's no mitzvah of Hashavat David in that case, because even though there's a siman, there's a sign on it, nevertheless, the person for sure 100% gave up hope of ever getting it back. But Vasita Yashar Ve'atov. Torah says, yes, there is no mitzvah anymore, but you want to be a good person, you want to improve your midot, return it to the guy anyways. And then you get two mitzvot. Mitzvah Hashavat Aveda, even though he gave up hope, the returning a lost object, and also the mitzvah of doing the right thing. It's a mitzvah. Why? Well, just say, okay, you know what? Tough luck. Finders, keepers, losers, sweepers. The guy gave up hope anyways. It's been there forever because it's trying to, the hashlish is trying to entrench into you a perspective in life. We go, and that perspective is go beyond yourself, go beyond the letter of the law. One of the one of the many opinions of the Gemara as to why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed is Ha'emidu Chachamim al Divrei Torah, that they stood on the words of Torah. What does that mean? Everything was black and white, 100% black and white. There was no wiggle room. There was no anything, which kind of gives us a little bit of a insight into certain factions within Orthodox Judaism, who by them everything is, I don't talk about the clothing, I'm talking about there's no such thing as gray. Everything is black and white. There's no such thing. Halacha has gray areas. It's built in on purpose. So when a person is not looking to vasita yashar v'atov, to go beyond, let's say in English, beyond the letter of the law. Here we say lifni mishurat hadin, working with inside the area of halacha, then it's a problem. And part of the mitzvot in the Torah are to do that as well. And it's not for nothing. There's an expression in Hebrew, it's lo bichdi, bet kaf dalad yud, lo bichdi. It's not for nothing that we see the following. If you look on the bottom, the shorish of the word halacha is hey, lamed, kaf. Here's the word halacha. It's also the shorish of the word halicha, lalechet, to walk. It's when you say it's not just about, we saw last week a couple of psukim, lalechet, darkei Hashem, to walk in the way of Hashem. So when we talk about halacha, it's not just meaning in English of Jewish law. It also means how we walk through this world. What is the path down which we are supposed to walk? And that's part of what this idea of Imein Torah Ein Derech Eretz. But what about Ein Derech Eretz Ein Torah? What's that all about? So if there is no Derech Eretz, there's no Torah. I think on a simplistic level, as far as what we can understand just on a very basic level, I think it's obvious to all of us. I'm sure we have all encountered something approaching what I'm about to describe. It didn't necessarily exactly happen like this to me, but whatever it might be. A person is standing by the kotel, they're davening, they're shuckling, they're swaying back and forth, and they're obviously into their tefillah. And then somebody walks in front of them and by accident bumps into them. And all of a sudden, pushes him, shoves him, mechutzaf, what are you doing? Look where you're walking, and starts cursing him. I actually have seen stuff like that. And it was just an accident. All their Torah and all their steiging and all their shuckling and all that goes out the window. The guy who's on the airplane, who takes his talus and puts it on, whips the teeth around his shoulders and smacks the guy who's sleeping and wakes him up. Where's his derech eretz? Okay, again, on the basic simplistic level, he made derech eretz in Torah. What does it mean he doesn't learn? Of course he has Torah. He doesn't know. All of a sudden, because he did something wrong, he doesn't say all his Torah is gone. That's not what it means. It means the values of Torah don't mean that much to him, or to her, that they're lacking. There's something seriously wrong with somebody. We all have our moments. There's no question. We all have our moments where we do things or say things that we regret. I have an idea for a short story. I have two, actually. I'll tell you both of the ideas. I haven't written them yet, but I do plan to, Bezrat Hashem. One is called Say Day, and it's the idea where you're allowed to say one day a year. It's the same day every year, where you could say whatever you want to somebody, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whatever it is. You will see their emotional response. You'll see what it is. And when the day is over, everything goes back to the way it was. You don't even remember it. But you have that ability for one day to be able to do that. That's one. Because there's so many things we'd like to say to somebody else, I'm sure. Again, good and not so good, maybe. The other one is, I don't know the name for it. Oh, yeah, I do remember. It's called I'm Bored. It's about an old school that's dismantling and upgrading. And on the front of the classroom, in one room, they had an old blackboard. And it was there for like 30, 40 years in the same classroom. And the teachers would write year after year after year, chalk on that backboard. But when they take that blackboard down, they put it in the trash heap. Turns out that board absorbed all the knowledge that was learned in those classrooms by everything the teachers over the years would write on it. And then how it then whatever. It's like a science fiction thing. So if you ever see these books in the store, please feel free to buy 10 of them. Speaking of books, I'm happy to say that my third volume, Piyutim Bezrat Hashem, will be coming out the next week or so. Bezrat Hashem, it's at the printer. It is Le'ilui Nishmat Yakir Teitelbaum, Hashem Yikom Damo, but I'll send out information about that. So how's that for a digression in a class? It's great. I don't remember what class this is anymore. Okay, so now, why does the Mishne say, again, on the Mishnah, when you learn Mishnah, you learn almost everything, but anything. But when you learn Mishnah, there's the statement, right? Imein derech eretz ein Torah. Pretty clear, like I just said. The guy who whips his tzitzit across someone's face while they're sleeping, blah, 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 blah. Fine, very nice. But there's always something more. There's always something deeper. A person who has a lack of, let's just use the word, the regular expression, derech eretz. A person who lacks proper etiquette, a person who lacks the ability to feel for another person. I'm not saying they're not an empath, but whatever it is, they just, they're into themselves, whatever it might be. The Torah cannot enter a person's heart who's empty of derech eretz to start with. It can't happen. Matter of fact, the Mesilat Yesharim talks about that in the very beginning as well. In addition to that, the Torah cannot exist in the heart of a person who doesn't follow a path that he learned through derech eretz. In other words, some people, probably my generation was one of the last ones like this, I'm going to guess, I hope, where the teacher would, give a smack on the hand or whatever it might be. There was a lot of fear in the classroom. Not always. I mean, I had some wonderful teachers. I don't want to besmirch, except for one. I don't want to besmirch any of my teachers. I had some good ones, some okay ones, and one horrific one. But besides that, how do you, when everything is out of fear and everything else, and you don't teach love, you don't teach respect, and you don't teach derech eretz, how does the Torah exist in someone's heart like that? It can't. It's just devoid of the ability to hold on to that. Because without Torah, there's also no derech eretz. Because without knowing what you're supposed to do, you don't know how you're supposed to approach it, obviously. A person who lacks, just let's say manners, a person who lacks good manners, proper behavior. In very general opinion, general way of saying it, they lack the ability to be makabel Torah. Let's go to the extreme. Someone who's a narcissist. Someone's a narcissist who the world revolves around them and everything's about them. And I'm not going to go into the clinical definition. Narcissist who fell in love with his reflection in the water. I know a person, does not live in Israel, who 100% narcissistic, who was asked if they wanted to play, what was the game? I think it was golf. I don't remember whatever the game was. By a teenager, this is an adult, maybe in his 50s at the time, and was asked by a teenager, would you like to play golf? He was evidently this kid was pretty good. And his response was, you want to play with me? Don't you know how good I am in golf? You really want to set yourself up to look like horrible relative to me? I actually heard this story from this person's spouse many years ago, and how sad. Now, take a book of rules and regulations and how you're supposed to act in life, what you're supposed to do, and you need to subjugate yourself to Hashem. How do they put that into their heart? How do they do that? This is the extreme. Okay, most people, thank God, are not narcissistic, but everyone is on somewhere of a spectrum in everything, right? You're either too kind, not kind enough. You're too angry. You never get angry, like the Rambam talks about. So there is an aspect of, and it should be, you have self-respect and you have to have a positive image and all these other things, not to be the narcissistic individual. But the more you go toward that extreme, the less chance, and again, Mesilat Yesharim talks about this, the less chance you're going to have of being able to really absorb and accept the words of Torah. What's the Rebbe? I never remember his name. Not Rebbe Levi Yitzchak. Okay, I'll think of his name. Said, why does it say in the Torah, Why does it say that the words of the Torah should be on your heart, not in your heart? He said, because the Kutzker Rebbe said, because some people, their heart is cold, is closed, it's stone. It doesn't want to accept anything. But he says, at least let the words sit there. So at the moment your heart opens a little bit, the words fall in. Okay, it's meant as a metaphorical sense, obviously not in literal sense, but it's the same idea here. If a person's heart is cold, is stone, and they don't, they don't relate to the world. Derech Eretz, the way of the land, right? The way of the people, the way of the land, how you treat each other. How do you expect to accept Torah? How do you expect that to get absorbed? If a person is commanded, love your neighbor as yourself, but he's a selfish individual and everything's about him, then how is he supposed to put that into practice? So being a person who is a good individual is not enough. Being a person who only learns Torah but doesn't put anything into practice, which is going to be the later part of this Mishnah, or isn't a nice person, is also missing a tremendous amount from their life as a Jew. It's both parts. Just like we have a guf and a neshama, just like we have a body, physical body, and a spiritual part of our neshama, and they go work in tandem. So too, the same thing happens with our Torah and a derech eretz. They go hand in hand. The next line in the Mishnah was im ein chochma ein yirah. If there is no wisdom, there cannot be fear. Yes, Judy wants to make a comment. Please go right ahead.
The thing with
No, you're cutting out.
derech eretz is in every country and among different people. The Eskimos say hello by rubbing noses. The way I found this out was I was in a class and I was part of a group, and the man who was in the group kept walking closer and closer and closer to me. And I kept backing away from him. We were standing in a class, and I said, "Excuse me, why are you so close to me?" He said, "I'm from Argentina, and people stand right beside each other, and they touch each other." I said, "I'm an Orthodox Jew, and the women and the men stand separately. We do talk with each other, and we do smile, but we don't touch."
You're pointing out something very important. I'm glad you said that. There is no black and white in what there are certain things that are black and white. Right? You don't walk up to somebody and spit in their face. You don't walk up to somebody and step on their foot. Obviously, there's some black and whites, but there are social mores. There are things that apply in certain areas that don't apply in others. I'll give you one example. It's not exactly what you're talking about. Is that let's take the average American city in the United States. That's an American city would be the United States. Look at that chokhmah. Going to a wedding, you don't show up in jeans and a nice t-shirt. You just don't. That's not the way you go. You don't for sure show up in shorts. Most shuls will not let you daven for the Amud if you're in sandals. Many shuls will not allow you to do that, to be the chazan. Here in Israel, everything goes, right? And not talking about the sandals. Some shuls will be very careful. You have to have shoes, and by especially amongst Faradim, that if you have short sleeves, they have these little extensions you put on before you go up to the Amud to daven, to be the chazan. But there are social standards, social mores, and again, you're absolutely right that it talks about in derech eretz ein Torah when a person is in a new environment. Let's say a person makes aliyah, and they don't know that there's a great example just happened the other day. Somebody had mentioned to me a story that their son was crying. That he's 10 years old. He was crying. He had just gotten a brand new pair of shoes, of gym. I call gym shoes. I can't say sneakers and tackies and runners and all that other stuff. New pair of gym shoes, and his friends all stepped on them. Well, evidently, it's a minhag custom that's you like say like mazal tov or whatever, like titchadesh by stepping on them, and he was very upset. He didn't know. So there's certain things that you would never do in one community, you do in another community. Same thing has to do with dress. Same thing has to do with many things. So you're right. We're talking right now in general terms. So thank you for that. Thank you, Judy. Okay. So im ein chokhmah ein yirah. If there is no wisdom, there cannot be awe/fear, meaning of God. I think on the surface, it makes perfect sense. Because if I don't know what the Melech wants from me, how am I supposed to be in a state of yirah, of awe and in fear and recognition of God if I don't know? I walk in, let's say, to a new job, and unless someone explains to me, I may know in general. Let's say I was hired as a cost accountant, and I may know in general what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know the pecking order. I don't know the politics yet. So to whom do I report? I probably know that by now, and where the copy machine is the bathrooms and the coffee, especially the coffee. But I don't necessarily know the ins and outs. And if I tell somebody this information, why did I tell him first? I'm supposed to tell him, or I'm supposed to tell her first. So you have to learn that. There's this be chokhmah before you understand the inner workings, so that makes sense. It's also why in Parak Bet we learned the statement that said, Ein bur yirechet. The person who is a boor is a person who's ignorant. Now, what does it mean to be ignorant? A person who's boor, who is ignorant cannot be in fear of a chet. What does that mean? So first, let me explain what that means, and then I'll broaden it. Because we talked about this a long time ago. Let's assume a person does not know that on Shabbat you cannot write. Okay, so they are ignorant of that law. Ignorance does not mean I'm ignorant in physics. Does that mean I'm a bad person? Does it mean I'm an ignoramus? No. It means I'm ignorant of certain things. I'm ignorant of quantum mechanics in a large area, most areas of math. But what I am saying is that when it comes to the idea that comes to the person who doesn't know that you cannot write on Shabbat, how could he be afraid if he has a pen? Oh, I might write by accident, so I can't really keep that with me. So a person who lacks that knowledge, that chokhmah, cannot be a yirechet. But the flip side is in ein yirah, ein chokhmah. This one we have to explain though. It says if there's no yirah, if there's no fear of heaven, there's no awe of heaven, of God, then there's no chokhmah, there's no wisdom. Matter of fact, we say Reshit chokhmah yirat Hashem, that the initial step of chokhmah is to have yirat Hashem. But this is almost a chicken and the egg thing, but maybe even less so. Wait, how does that work? If you don't have the chokhmah, we just said, if you don't have the chokhmah, how can I be yareh? How can I be afraid? Again, going back to the Sharim, a person he gives the example, a person walking at the edge of a cliff. If you don't know that there's a cliff there, you're not afraid, right? If someone takes a piece of wood, which is in the States they call it 2x4, which is in 2 inches by 4 inches. It's rounded up. So you take a 2x4 and you stand it on the ground and you ask me to walk on it. No problem, right? Absolutely no problem. But I am deathly afraid of heights. You take that same board and put it just a few meters, a meter up in the air. That's it. A couple of feet up in the air, 3 feet, and that's it. There's no chance I'm walking on that because I'm afraid I'm going to fall. But if I have my eyes closed and someone just puts me on there, I'm not aware that height is there. No problem. I'll still be able to just walk across that board. So if there's no chokhmah, there's no intellect, excuse the idea of wisdom of something, how is it that you have yirah? How can yirah come first? You don't know about it necessarily. So most of the Mefarshim say, some of them say that even before acquiring chokhmah, and we can see this in children, if you give even a modicum of a good Jewish education in your home, you will see in children this ability to understand a little inkling of Hashem's existence. And there was what's called Yirat HaRomimut, the fear and the awe of the grandeur of Hashem. That Hashem can do everything. Hashem causes everything. Hashem runs the world. Now, does that mean I understand that the Shulchan Aruch is broken down into 4 sections and it has how many simanim and each? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean that I understand at that point there are 39 melachot on Shabbat that I can't do in many, many subcategories? It doesn't mean that. I don't have that chokhmah yet. But I can have the yirah of Hashem, being in awe of God, being even in trepidation But for a child, you don't want to push that into their head yet. You want more of the awe and the beauty, even before I've acquired much chokhmah. So that's the kind of chokhmah, of the yir'ah, that this Mishnah is also referring to. Next statement the Mishnah makes has to do with bina and dat. Let's take a look at the Mishnah again. Right over here. Im ein bina, ein dat, yellow. Im ein bina, ein dat. There's no intellect. How does he say it in English? Let me see. Where there is no knowledge, there is no understanding. Okay, I'm going to use a different terminology. When there is no intellect, there is no knowledge. When there is no knowledge, there is no intellect. Okay, so what does this mean? What are we talking about here? So first we have to understand there are now three, as I mentioned before, three expressions of knowledge we've mentioned so far in this Mishnah. Chokhmah, wisdom; Binah, intellect; Da'at, knowledge. They sound similar. I mean, I have a lot of intellect, let's say. I may have a lot of knowledge. I may have a lot of wisdom. I don't mean me. I'm saying a person. We use those terms somewhat interchangeably. So what are we talking about here? What are those three expressions? Now, if you've learned Tanya, you know that is a massive part of the whole etiology and approach to Torah and God in this world. Again, I go back and I restate that the word Chabad stands for Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at, and that's what the Alter Rebbe goes through much of that in depth of what each one of those is. But I'll just give you what Rabbeinu Yonah says about in this Mishnah regarding Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. He says Chokhmah is general knowledge, external general knowledge that's acquired from teachers, it's acquired from books. It's also why the psukim, many psukim in Mishne, which we'll be learning starting soon, Bezrat Hashem, uses the word lishmoa lahakshiv, to listen, to pay attention, when it talks about the topic of chokhmah. It's external from you. You acquire and learn it from people, reading, hearing. Bina is already where you take the knowledge you have, the chokhmah, or the wisdom you've acquired, and you use it and develop it, and you build on the original chokhmah. I'm going to come back to the word bina in a minute. And the third one is da'at. What's da'at? It's a person's personal chokhmah. It's the ability to acquire more chokhmah, to seek out more and use it to say, wait, I understand X because I learned this. Now I need to go out and achieve more and grab more and to connect to it and to feel it. What does that mean? Torah says, Vayeda Adam et Ishto, and that Adam knew his wife. Vayeda Kayin. All the time you see in the Torah, early on, especially in Bereshit, says, and the man knew his wife. What does it mean? They knew each other. They had relations. So the Torah doesn't sometimes uses euphemisms and sometimes says things clear out. So it sounds like it's just using a euphemism, but that's not what it means at all. Dat is the highest level of connection. It says that eventually the whole world will be filled De'ah Hashem. The whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God. What does that mean? It's the highest possible connection a person can have with someone or something. So Dat, in this case, Chabad, Chachma, Bina, that's the highest level. Let's go backwards. Bina. There's a Mishnah and other places tell us that 10 levels of wisdom came down to the world, or intellect. 10 levels of intellect came down to the world, and 9 were given to women, and 1 was given to man. Now, we talk about the concept of women's intuition. It's, as the kids say, it's a thing. Why? When Hashem creates Chava, he takes from Adam's side. It doesn't say his rib. It says his side. It says Vayiven et Aisha. He says he built woman. Vayiven, the shorish is bet nun he, same shorish as livnot, to build, right? It's also the same shorish of bina. The bina was given this intellect, this ability to see the havin davar mitoch davar, to be able to figure out something from something else on a different level, was given to a woman more so than a man. So that's why I say that this idea of women's intuition is truly a thing. I want to mention one more thing about this topic, that it says When it talks about da'at, it talks about the idea also in Tanya about Talmud Torah keneged kulav. That Torah learning is equal to all of the mitzvot. So he discusses there, the Admor HaZaken, the Alter Rebbe discusses why. So on a simplistic level is technical, because without the Torah, you can't do the other stuff, right? If I don't know that I have to put on tefillin, I'm not going to put on tefillin. This is on a much deeper level than that. When a person eats food, drinks water, or whatever else, that food and drink literally becomes a part of them. So it becomes our blood, muscle tissue, fat, and other things. So the same thing is true with Torah. When I take 11 at Torah, it's an external action. It affects my neshama, but it's still an external action. When I learn Torah, it's in my mind. It becomes literally a part of me, just like food and drink. So that's why Talmud Torah keneged kulam. That's one of the reasons, because it actually does become a part of me. So our da'at, our knowledge base on the highest level of the connection, when we infuse our brain with Torah as well. What links all three of these together? Chokhmah, Binah, and Da'at. Without Da'at, without natural Chokhmah to understand the words of the Chachamim, there's no room for Binah. If I don't understand something, how am I? Let's say, for example, I'm learning something. I'm like now I'm finishing up the sixth section of the Mishne. I've been doing some things that are quite complicated about Tuman Tahar, ritual purity, impurity, and I read when I understand. I read the Hebrew, I read the English. Okay, but does that mean I'm at the level I could say, oh, you know what? Because this Mishnah here in Mikvaot said this, and probably in Sechet Yadayim it meant this, and I could connect it to Uktzin. My brain's not there. I can't understand one thing because of this, and to Havin Davar Bitoch Davar. So without that ability, without that chokhmah, building and building and building, and that it doesn't allow me to do the binah aspect. And without that happening, it doesn't become a part of me. So these are one of the ways that these are connected. Even da'at is for sure not an innate trait. That's for sure. A person can develop it. You can. All three are developed. There's not a real word. Developable. There's no such word. They can be developed. Okay, how? Chokhmah. You can, in fact, add to your knowledge base. Just a minute. Well, people are not able to learn Torah because of physical health problems, emotional issues. Okay, I was asked, what about people who are not able to learn Torah because of physical health problems or emotional issues? So the Rambam tells us that no one is patur, no one is completely exempt from Torah. We're not talking about, he says that he's not talking about somebody who's mentally incapacitated. Nor are we talking about someone who does not have, maybe, God forbid, a person who's an adult who has the mental acuity of a 2-year-old. We're not talking about that. Talking about a person who doesn't have, even a person who's old and infirm, and which none of you are, Baruch Hashem. There's still a requirement. Now, does that mean the person has to sit in front of a Gemara or Pinei Halacha 7 hours a day? No. But does that mean that they're patur completely? No. You can, in theory, a person is Yotzei the mitzvah of Talmud Torah by saying Shema in the morning and Shema in the evening. That's the minimum of Torah, because it says right in Sefer Yehoshua, Gitabo Yomam V'Layla. You should work on Torah day and night. Most people, even those who claim they do, don't. So you're supposed to do that. So again, the Chachamim tell us as long as you say Shema in the morning, in the morning and in the evening, you are Yotzei the mitzvah of Talmud Torah for that day. So again, Judy, at that point, the person who's able even to do that, they've done their mitzvah. I'm not talking about a person who has these machsomim or these barriers. Talking right now, that's a good question, in general. So, where was I? I was saying, I lost my train of thought now. They're all acquired. You can all acquire. Chokhmah, let's say you have a topic you're interested in. So you go on the internet, you get a book, you talk to a teacher, and you learn more about it. That's one way of acquiring your chokhmah. proactively. Bina, now you have that chokhmah. Now you know this stuff. What are you going to do with it? So you try to connect the dots. You try and say, well, I learned this and I learned that and I know about that and I can figure things out because of that. And then it becomes dot, becomes a part of you, becomes your knowledge base that you yourself have grown and have added to as well. One other statement in this Mishnah. Imein kemach ein Torah, imein Torah ein kemach. If there is no, it's this one right here before the red mark. So it's here. Imein kemach, if there's no flour, meaning food, there's no Torah. Imein Torah ein kemach. If there's no Torah, there can't be food. So we've got to talk about that for a few minutes. If a person is hungry, I'm not talking about they're running late for lunch. Talk to a person, God forbid, they don't have much food in their house. They're poor, or God forbid they have some kind of an illness that eating is difficult, in some cases impossible. Therefore, they may be, God forbid, on IV nutrition, or God forbid, a feeding tube. Let's just take a quote, more common case. Person struggling to make ends meet, and I actually knew of a couple of families, not here, but in the old country, who their Friday night they had spaghetti and ketchup. That was their main meal. That was it. Nothing else. Challah, wine, or grape juice, and that was all they had. I didn't know about it at the time. I knew about it afterwards. So I knew about it at the time, be a different story. And then, Baruch Hashem, the city is blessed with tremendous amount of chesed, as hopefully every city is, and helping people who are known to the community to help them out. But if a person's hungry, person's starving, okay, think about a day that's a fast day, not Yom Kippur, maybe Tisha B'Av, or another fast day. And if you don't fast for whatever physical reason, I'm sure you can imagine this. You're near the last hour of the fast. It's been a difficult fast. And you're trying to do something, maybe to not think about the fast. And I know you're supposed to think about the last of Mikdash and all that, but tachos for a lot of people is very tough. Right? So what is it you're thinking about? I tell you, you can think about anything except the pink elephant. Of course, you're only going to think about a pink elephant. At that point, you're only thinking about food. You think you're going to sit there and take out Sefer Yirmiyahu and start learning some of the bad things in Sefer Yirmiyahu about the Bnei Israel? Are you going to, at the end of Asara B'Tevet, as it comes to the Northern Hemisphere at least, to like 4:30 in the afternoon, it's getting close, but you're really, really hungry. It's hard to focus on anything if you're very hungry. Kal v'chomer is something, how much more so, something that you really need to focus on when you try to learn Torah. So on the basic level, im ein kemach, if there's no food, there's no Torah. Let's take a little bit wider than that. Let's talk about parnasa, not just food. A person doesn't have parnasa, doesn't have an income, or they're struggling greatly for it. It's hard to find the time to sit and learn because they have to try to make ends meet. They may have to take a couple jobs. They may have to go out and see if they can collect money for themselves. And here's a statement that is not political at all, because it applies in every single migzar of our people, every grouping, every whatever the word is, sect, subsection. When a man and woman get married, there's a ketubah. Ketubah is a legal document. It's a shtar. In the ketubah, it has requirements of the man, nothing of the woman. Everything in the ketubah is on the man to do. It says, "Vana eflach oker ve'ezon va'farnes yetichi lichi kehulchut govri nudain dechvolchin v'chule v'chule v'chule." I've said it so many times. Baruch Hashem, I've had the ability, I've had the opportunity to say it many times, and it's a document that people read, and that's why it's important for the Rav HaMesader, the rabbi's mayor, and the couple to make sure the Chatan understands what's in there. The job, one of the requirements of besides to love and to cherish, it's also in there, his wife, is he has to support his wife, he has to have a roof over her head, He has to, all these things, they're all to protect the woman. Remember, of course, it's originally from the time period where women had no rights. They had no anything except for a few places on earth, such as in Judaism. And even then it was different. But it's to make sure that the woman, the wife, is taken care of properly. And one of the main things, and it says it a few places and a few times in the Ketubah, is the man's job to make a parnasa. It's the man's job to support his family. Now, does that mean if they both work and the wife makes more money, that's a problem? Of course not. But it does not. It also means, and I've seen this, I've heard this from Haredi rabbis as well, so I'm not the first one to say this, that when a man just sits and learns and sends his wife out, and he makes himself, now it doesn't have to be just Haredi, it could be any grouping, makes himself where he is requiring people to support his family because they don't have money, sends his wife out to work, he is breaking the contract he signed in the Ketubah. It's absolutely wrong. Forget everything else. Forget the army, forget all the protests, put that all aside. He signed the shtar. He signed a document with his name, with witnesses that said he is going to support his wife. And when a person chooses to not, now when this person sits in kollel, they make a stipend, and for some it's enough, and that's great. And then they get some handout from the government and don't give anything back, but that's a different story. In some cases, not all, but there is a requirement to fulfill so that you don't end up in the situation of imen kemach ein Torah. That's on one side. The other side, the flip side, is in Torah ein kemach. What does that mean? What does it mean that without Torah, there's no kemach, there's no parnasa, there's no food? The Navi tells us in Yeshayahu, Hoi kol tzamei lechu lamai. Whoever is thirsty, let him come and drink. And the Mefarshim say, Ein Torah, Ein mayim ala Torah. What is mayim? What is water? Torah. Water is the basic sustainer of life. How do we know that? Besides the fact that we know it intellectually, and most of our bodies made up of water, is that when we say that scientists are always looking for signs of life on another planet, they're not looking for ET. They're not expecting to find ET. They're looking for water or signs that there was water, because without water, life cannot be sustained as we know it, at least. I'm parenthetically, I'm a very big believer in that there is life of some other sort out there in God's grand universe. I have zero to base it on other than my own beliefs and thoughts, but has nothing to do with this class. So if a person doesn't learn Torah, there's the sustenance for that person's life, for the neshama. You have to feed your neshama. Remember, he said we're a goof and a neshama. How do we feed our goof? With food and drink and eating properly and exercising, shalom neda, all these things. But for our neshama, we have to eat and we have to exercise. What is it we have to exercise? Our chokhmah, our bina, our dad, our derech eretz, our kemach. We have to, our Torah. We have to do everything we can to feed our neshama, and that's only through Torah. We can't feed our neshama any other way because the neshama doesn't need anything else except the Torah and mitzvot. So without Torah, the kemach for our neshama is gone. But on the other side, without the kemach, without parnasa, there's no Torah. You can't learn. It becomes very difficult. There's a whole machloket in the Gemara about what age of guy is supposed to get married. Not what age, sorry. About what comes first. Should you get married and then sit and learn? Should you sit and learn and get married? So it depends on the person's personality. If they won't be able to focus on learning because they're so thinking about, I need to find a wife and get married, then they should get married first. If they can feel they can learn longer and wait for a little bit longer, they should wait longer. What the halacha is immaterial. I don't know if it's a halachic issue per se, but it's a discussion in the Gemara. So I'll just give you a kind of little preview before we end. Next week, we're going to take a look at the second half of this Mishnah. Some of you may show us a separate Mishnah. We're just going to talk about it for a couple minutes, and I'm going to move into the last very brief Mishnah, but it has a lot of depth to it. The last Mishnah coming up to finish off Pirke Gimel Bezrat Hashem. Wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Have a good day, and B'srat Tovot. Thanks all for being here.